I love your home already, and I haven't even seen it. Does that sound crazy? It's not. When we improve our surroundings, we simultaneously empower ourselves, which means every inch of space within your reach right now is an opportunity to tell the story you want to be living. Tell me that's not its own kind of wonderful. I have spent the last 15 years consulting clients and their homes through the wisdom of Feng Shui, intentional design, and some crystal clear communication. And you know what happens when you bring those three together? Life-changing magic. Your home is already in a conversation with you, so why not learn how to merge that awareness with some simple, straightforward, and smart action to co-create the life you want? I'm Amanda Gibby Peters, and I am here to help you learn how. Welcome to House Therapy. Out of everything that I have ever purged or cleared, my books were my Everest. I love books and I have an appreciation, we'll call it, for good magazines. So what I am about to propose in today's episode, I have done myself and many times. If you've been feeling like your book collection could use a little lift, I'm going to share with you how you can finally start to confidently edit those shelves. So you're going to do this in a couple rounds. And your first round, you're going to sit with this notion that everyone's voice and opinion, that's authors, artists, publishing houses, etc., is a guest in your space. And while you might love some of their company, you probably don't feel that way about all of them. And maybe you don't feel as passionate about them as you once did, which, by the way, is just a sign of growth. Once you've steeped in that collective company, notice, are there any magazines you can confidently toss? How about a few books you just didn't love or actually never finished? You can start adding those to your first pile. And finally, I like to white glove the collection. And if you notice that any of them are dusty, like super dusty, that might be a good sign that you're not made for each other. So recycle and or donate your pile and then go for that first round of virtual high fives because you got to the first camp on this trek. Now, in the second round, what I want you to start thinking about is experiences and stories that you want to emulate in your own life. This is where like gossipy mags, crime stories, and anything nefarious is usually pretty easy for me to let go. I personally prefer voices who inspire creativity or challenge me to think in new ways, or stories that share lessons that someone's learned along the way. I'm always good for a memoir. Likewise, if a book provokes me outside my comfort zone, it'll probably remain. However, you need to use your own filter, obviously, to decide what stays and goes. So maybe self-help or memoirs spark your gag reflex. If so, that's where your next pile begins. The point here is release the lackluster voices and allow yourself to really strut in that lightness of being, because now you've made it to camp 2. All right, here's round 3. And this one takes the longest because it's both an honest editorial and let's call it a reacquaintance process. I love, as I've just said, being surrounded by good stories, but when they lose their resonance. And again, this just happens because if we're learning, we change. And when we change, we outgrow things. And that is a good sign. So when the stories or books lose their resonance, a dusty shelf of forgotten tales muffles our ability to discern and delight in our own wisdom. And I'll tell you where this shows up most for me: the books I keep bedside. Is anyone else guilty of having a tall stack of books that they're going to read? So the question here is, who have you outgrown? what no longer aligns with your journey today. For example, if your shelf's still home parenting books and your kids have left the nest, I'd call that an easy edit. Where are you really ready to open up more? So this step, I think, practically requires that you hold every book and flip through its pages before deciding. So when I purge books, it's both a way of sprucing up the room they live in and ensuring that our home currently reflects us. Remember, our homes influence the stories, the experiences, the outcomes in our lives. So a regular check-in of your books is no different than, say, editing the clothes that are hanging in your closet, which is why the prompt for both works here. Does this still, quote unquote, fit me today? Now I know, Amanda, you wrote a book, so you're telling me to clear my shelves but buy yours? What gives? Or, Amanda, we don't need to dumb down society. I totally disagree with this. And yes, these are comments that I receive anytime I make this suggestion outside the Simple Shui house. And yet here I am saying it again on a podcast. So I compiled a short list of categories that I've confidently purged, and hopefully it's going to inspire you to see your shelves in a refreshing and meaningful way too. So first up, how to get your child to sleep books. I had all of them, but with teenagers that have moved on and no plans to have any more kids, we are well past that stage. So those books are easy peasy to release. Cookbooks I rarely use. So once upon a time, I collected cookbooks. They were my favorite gift to receive. And while I still love and own many stacks of cookbooks, I don't always use them all. But you know what? There are people who will. So I'm happy to gift them along, because in a kitchen where they're used is a kitchen with excellent feng shui. Technology books. Oh, for the love of figuring out platforms and different programs. I feel like this so does not need to be said, but technology changes rapidly and books are outdated quickly, period. Hobby books. You know, those projects and dreams that never started and somehow we outgrow? Like, I once had goals of learning photography. Like when I started my blog, all the best blogs had the most amazing photography. So I bought all the books, but the spines never cracked. I liked the idea of being good at it, but I never fully committed to learning photography. And as popular as photography is, especially film, these books have likely now found a much better home. Unsettling stories. Okay, so I'm going to totally admit I run a little different on this. And for people who love horror or crime, this one is just me, okay? But my rule is if a story doesn't settle well, kind of gives me that ick, it doesn't get a shelf life here. And finally, books I never finished. If I haven't gone back to pick it up or even thought, oh, I really want to finish that, like, I don't know, to be really generous here, within the last 10 years, I am totally A-okay letting it go. As for actually clearing those shelves, I have a few strategies I use. So if you fancy, feel free to borrow any of these. Okay, so the way I'm going to work through this is hardest to easiest, okay? So once a year, I take every book off every shelf to wipe down and clean the shelves thoroughly. And I only do one room at a time. We have several bookcases throughout our house. So I'm going to tell you, this is a pretty full contact purge. So you got to go into it knowing it's going to take some time. And I put the books back on the shelves after everything has been wiped down and it's, minty fresh. I put the books back in a new way so that the energy circulates differently. All right, so here we're going to tackle something that I get asked about all the time, the color coding of some of my shelves. And oh my, does this get so many colorful comments. But here's what's really happening. So instead of grouping my books by genre or alphabetically, I'm giving myself the opportunity to scan the shelves, revisit, if even briefly, stories and lessons I have read when I am searching for another book. Like when I think of a book and I go to the shelves, I'm literally touching the spines and scanning them, looking for whatever book it is that I'm trying to find. And this keeps the awareness of what is on my shelves pretty intact. So as I'm putting the books back in this color-coded system, I realize that some of them aren't just going to make the cut. And the simple truth is, because I am always going to be buying more books to read, I really do have to hold myself to this honest assessment of what still makes me actually feel like I want that company in my house, okay? So you're going to pull everything off the shelves. You're going to wipe the shelves down, and then you're going to put them back in a new way so that you're not on autopilot, and you're going to put back what still gives you a little bit of spark or buzz. Okay, the second recommendation I have is when I get tired of seeing the same books that reside on the bookshelf, say in my office, I have a bookcase in front of my desk. I will move some of those stacks upstairs because we have a bookcase up there, and I'll bring quote unquote new books from up there downstairs. So this little swing your partner do-si-do keeps me from becoming indifferent to the books around me. And I actually think it provokes and triggers new ways of thinking, because when I see the title of a book, when I see the colors, when I remember or recall something I read, it gives me a new way of thinking, right? And seeing things in a different way is how you see things differently in your life. Okay, my third and last suggestion. Whenever I have a donation box going out, say I did a quick closet purge, or we went through the kitchen, or we cleared out a storage closet, I will also do a quick perusal of the shelves and grab a few books that I know I'm ready to part with. So how do I know I'm ready to part with them? I'm so glad you asked. Because of the 2 previous edits, right? When I'm putting books back in a color-coded way and I'm constantly scanning them looking for a book, or when I'm moving things upstairs and downstairs, I have this awareness of books that maybe I'm going to be ready to let go of the next time I do a purge. So I have an idea of what stories have gotten the hall pass, if you will, for me one too many times. And I think this approach also helps warm me up to finally releasing something that has faded for my attention or journey. So let me wrap all of this by saying, because I know a lot of us get into the feelings when it comes to our books. With literally hundreds of books in my home, I am hardly advocating look over books. Feng Shui is not here to dumb anyone down. In fact, I think it absolutely rallies for your empowerment, your brilliance, and intelligence in all things. But the more I've cleared out what doesn't reflect me, the clearer my own voice becomes. And that's my pull. However, with any suggestions I share here on the podcast, or on the socials, or in my newsletters, or on the blog, keep this in mind. I always want you to run the wisdom through your own filter. And if the pull isn't there for you, just pass on the advice. And that's our episode, my loves. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to head over to simpleshui.com if you're craving a bigger serving of house love. And if you like what you're hearing, I hope you follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you love what you're learning, will you leave me a review? Your note will totally make my day and help even more people find the show. Have a fabulous day, and I can't wait to meet you back here next week.